Afternoon, everyone. It's Susan Coffin here for Attitude Magazine and for Attitude's ADHD Experts webinar series. Welcome to all of you joining us today and to our guest speaker, Shari Gent of the Northern California Department of Education. Our topic today is organization skills at school. You wouldn't be listening, and 4,000 of you wouldn't have signed up for this webinar if you didn't know that most kids need help finding school papers, keeping track of homework assignments, managing time during the school year, and organization is just a big challenge. And top of mind right now as we head into the school year. We're just so pleased today to welcome Shari Gent to advise us on how to help children get organized and stay organized during the school year. Thank you so much for being here today, Shari.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Our thanks also go to Time Timer, the sponsor of today's ADHD Experts webinar. Time Timer, if you don't know what it is, you have to click on their website, timetimer.com. It is the only timer that literally visually depicts time passing. And as such, it really has the potential to help the whole family stay focused and on track. So visit the Time Timer website, www.timetimer.com. And before Shari begins, let me just tell you a bit about her extremely impressive credentials. She is an education specialist, as I said, with the Northern California Department of Education. She conducts trainings in both behavior and educational strategies for ADHD students in over 300 different school districts throughout Northern California. She's the parent of a young child with ADHD, as practically everyone on this webinar is, and she serves on the editorial advisory board of Attention Magazine, which, if you don't know it, is the magazine of ADD, the National Advocacy Association for People with Attention Deficit Disorder, wonderful organization. She is a parent-to-parent teacher for CHADD and was chosen by CHADD as the Educator of the Year, So before she starts talking, let me just tell you really briefly how this works in case some of you are new. Please post your questions in the box on your screen. You can post them at any time while she's talking or afterwards. And after Shari finishes her slide presentation, she'll answer as many questions as we have time for in the hour allotted. If you have problems hearing us, and this comes up, this is an internet-based webinar, so the solution will be to dial in via your phone line. You'll see the phone number on your screen. Commonly asked question, how am I going to take notes on these slides? Can I get the slides afterwards? The answer is yes. There'll be a replay of this webinar as if you were there with the slides that you can download on the Attitude website, attitudemag.com/webinars. So if you'd like to listen to it again, if you want to download the slides and take notes, just log on to attitudemag.com/webinars. With that, let me turn it over to Shari with our thanks again for being here.
Hello, everyone. Once again, I'm just so delighted to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. You know, one of the problems that we often face when we are at home with our kids and trying to get them ready for school is just locating everything that we need to have in order to get ready to go. So I don't know about all of you, but I find that it's so easy to be scattered when our kids are easily scattered as well. And so that's why I really wanted to share some of this information with you. All right, we're going to be talking about 5 overall steps that I believe will be so helpful for you in organizing your lives and that of your child's. Number 1, understand how your child now organizes materials and their thoughts. Number 2, be sure to stay cool, calm, and collect everything in one place. There's a time and a place for everything. Be sure that you have excellent communication with your child's school, and we'll talk about some ways that you can do that. Incorporate some instruction in teaching your child not only how to tell time, but how to manage their time. And 5, you have to be the structure present for your child until they're mature enough to take over so that your child can be the creative force that you know that he or she is. Okay, well, you know, when my son was little, I really was frustrated. I kind of looked around, and every day he didn't automatically clean up his room like I thought he probably should. And so we had to structure that into our day, and he was constantly forgetting his homework papers and leaving things all over the house, and I am not super organizer myself, so this was really a challenge to me until I realized one Halloween that when he's motivated, he really could organize things. And so when he was about 7 and he came back from trick-or-treating, I was amazed to find him in his room sorting out his Halloween candy. And there are a number of different ways that this task could be done. So one child might sort out Halloween candy by the type of candy, chocolate versus jellies, or maybe by the color. So maybe all the brown candies plus the brown chocolate plus the brown jelly bellies all go together, and the red ones and the yellow ones, or maybe by sweet versus sour, so they can choose whether they want to have sour or sweet that day. So I found my son sorting out his Halloween candy, and I realized, voila, he actually does have strategies there when he's extremely motivated. So I think that as a parent, our first job is to watch our child and know them really well. Kuchner and Moran have identified 3 different organizational styles that kids and adults can have. We're going to talk about the basic characteristics of these 3 styles. If you are interested in taking an actual survey about your child's organizational style, you can go to the link that's on the screen right here. But we're not going to go to that right now. I would suggest coming back to this webinar later and playing with that. So the first type of organizer is the visual organizer, and this is a child who really responds well to visual cues, loves color coding, can't stand clutter generally, and remembers things that they've lost in relationship to where they were last seen. And then we have the spatial organizer, who tends to be dramatic and to relate really well to movement and be sensitive to feelings in himself and others. This is the type of organizer who needs to have a totally clear space before getting started with working and needs to have everything within his or her reach. And finally, and this is a child who really remembers things that are lost in relationship to where they use them last. This is a kinesthetic kind of child. And finally, we have the sequential organizer, which I think is a little bit rarer in kids with ADHD, but many times kids that have sort of obsessive or compulsive type tendencies might be more sequential, and they do really well when they can organize in piles. However, watch out, don't touch those piles, because they need that structure in order to feel that they know what they're doing. And also, they tend to think in chronological order, and they really do well with sequential steps. They tend to think of missing items in relationship to the time they had it. Oh yeah, I had it this morning. And so these are the 3 basic types of organizers that we're going to be looking at. But I want you to remember that when you're thinking about being cool, calm, and collected and making use of your child's organizational style, there's one basic principle to keep in mind, and that is KISS. Keep it simple. So you don't want to have a lot of complicated organizational organizational strategies in your home, and you don't want to have a lot of complicated spaces. You want everything to be visually simple and very direct. Okay, I'm not getting the, oh, there we go. Okay, and the reason for this is that children and teens with ADHD have a neurological handicap. you are going to need to be the prosthesis or the external structure for their organization, as I mentioned earlier, until they are able to catch up and to learn those strategies themselves. Unfortunately, kids and teens with ADHD have up to a 30% delay in the area of organization, as well as sometimes socially and emotionally. So they're going to get there, but they need you to be there for them until they do. One thing to keep in mind is that it's so important to remember that your role as a parent is to have a positive relationship with your child. If you get to the point where your child's getting frustrated with working with you, or you're getting frustrated with their performance in terms of organization, and this oftentimes happens when kids begin to differentiate, like around the end of middle school and the beginning of high school, you may want to find an outside person to help with the organizational aspect of your child's homework and schoolwork, so that you can be there for him or her emotionally as a parent. Okay, I just lost the PowerPoints. Stuart? Okay, there we go. Okay, so remember, cool, calm, and collected. So you want to put things in pertinent items in one place. Create a command center. This should be at a central location where everyone spends some time during the day. This could be in the kitchen, the living room, a family room. These are all good places. So you may want to include a calendar for more than 1 month, and be sure to put everyone's event on the calendar. Maybe having 3 separate calendars for if you have 3 kids would be too confusing, so keep it simple. Many stationery stores sell wipe-off multi-month calendars. That's one option. And then make a list of things that you want to include in your command center. All right, these are some of the things that I would like to include in mine, some of the things that I thought were good for in my house, which is just calendars, sports schedules, your medical records, family rules if you have negotiated those with your kids, emergency contacts, the veterinarian, the fire department, the police, a 911 reminder. Maybe you have behavior charts or chore lists. Those are all things that are great in the command center, in your kitchen or your dining area, your den, wherever your family tends to gather. Okay, so then you also want to consider another area of the house, which you might call a launch pad. This is a picture of a before and after area in the garage of a house. So the picture on the left is just, as you can see, it's just a simple, quiet corner of the house or of the garage, wherever your kids gather before they leave. Maybe you have a vestibule or entryway. And you can put a number of things in this area. This is sort of the grab-and-go command center. Some of the things you may want to include are individual calendars of the day, to-do lists, a charging station, backpacks, backpack maps, which we'll talk about later, to-do lists or check-off lists to be sure that they have everything, any keys they need, sports equipment, money, lunch money, or lunch. All of these things you may want to think about gathering the next day's items together and putting them out there the night before. All this will help you at home. But what about when your child is at school? So if you're telling your child you need to keep your locker neat so that you're sure that you get things home, this is kind of what your child's locker might look like, especially if he's your typical junior high student with ADHD. And this is what your child's locker might look like after you tell him or her that they need to clean out their locker at school. The reason for this is our kids do not operate by remote control. So the first thing you need to do when you start this school year is to establish communication with the school. Find a point person that you feel comfortable with, you know cares about your child, and with that person, design a communication system. Agree on how you're going to communicate. This could be by email, texting, phone call. Some schools have school websites. There's schoolnotes.com, which you could help your point person set up. But this has, for younger kids, this point person was going to likely be their elementary school teacher, but when you get into junior high and high school, then you have multiple teachers, so it may be a counselor. But you need to find someone that you have rapport with and that you trust, and that your child also trusts. All right, now we're going to be talking about the shuttle system or the transport system. And starting with the proverbial planner. Okay, so a lot of times these days, middle schools and high schools have their own planners that kids get. So here's a picture of a planner from a typical middle school that was written in by one of my students. As you notice, there's not a whole lot on here, and that's because kids with ADHD need a little more structure than other kids do in order to be successful with planners. First of all, they need to be setting priorities. So I like the kind of planners that have some sort of time management system embedded in the actual planner. This is an assignment sheet that my son and I created when he was in 8th grade. And notice it has a place for things that he needs to do later, things that need to happen right away. And then I'm going to talk about the time management system when we get there, but it has boxes for him to check and to take care of time management. All right, this is a kind of interesting little planner. I noticed when I was checking out my links before the webinar, there should be a hyphen between my and time. That is the producer of this planner for kids. This is a large wipe-off board that has color code and magnet and structure for your child to plan their day. Younger kids really like this, elementary school age kids, I would say, and it helps them because it's visual and kinesthetic. It goes for both your visual organizer as well as your spatial organizer. They can move things around and really see and feel where time is in space. All right, a lot of kids these days, and especially kids with ADHD, really do not like writing. That is the one area that I run into time and time again. My kid won't pick up his pencil to complete his work. So that's one of the barriers that we're looking at when we're looking at using a planner. Some kids, however, really tune into technology, especially kids with ADHD, because it gives them immediate stimulation and feedback. So I'd like to point out a few apps that can work very well for recording homework. One is the My Homework app, and this is just one. There's a number of pages on My Homework app, but I wanted to share this with you because it, again, breaks up homework into upcoming, things that are due really soon, things that maybe were late, which, let's face it, our kids oftentimes have to turn in late work, and that's a whole other topic about how to arrange that with your teacher. But many times we have accommodations for late work, so it helps if your student lists it here and then giving themselves a gold star for work completed. So I really like that feature of this particular app. For your older child, and actually you can adapt this for middle school as well, there is something called the iStudies. I like iStudies Pro. It has color coding. Provides a lot more structure. It's a little more complex than My Homework app. All right, another shuttle system that you need to consider are binders. All right, binders and binder alternatives, because some kids, you may try a million binders and the binder just doesn't work. But one thing that really helps with binders is to provide the type of binder that has a zipper, so that when papers get torn out, or if your child doesn't actually file the papers, at least they're inside the binder. You also want to include a really good pocket that has all the things that your student is going to need for any assignment, so at least one of everything. And I would advise having him do a binder check on a daily basis, especially your younger student up to about 7th or 8th grade. Some kids don't do well with binders, but you may want to add something like this folder into a binder where your student has the opportunity to file papers that they need to attend to that day in one pocket, and when they're done with it, they get a sense of satisfaction by moving it to the turn-in pocket. Some schools do this with younger age kids, K through 3. They'll send home a homework packet, but it really helps if you label what has to be done and what your student needs to turn in. For older kids, these can be hole punched. Binders like this can be found hole punched, or sometimes they're attached to dividers. I've found them on binder dividers. There's some binder dividers that have been created with pockets, so it would be up to you to label, take home, and turn in for your student. But you can file one of these for each subject if you like. I know my son did not take to binders really well. It wasn't until high school when we found a really good alternative, the accordion file system. And this is really avoids that problem of the holes tearing out of the ring binder. So all the student has to do is throw the paper into the appropriate folder when you're using an accordion file system. One of my favorites is the color-coded system by Pendaflex. It's a vertical file system that can be carried to school in a packet and hung up at home for easy reference. Then this also works well for creating a storage system of papers and memos that have already been completed. So you may want to create a storage system at home for work that is done and over with, but that your student may refer to or may need to refer to in order to study for a test, or you may want to have a record of in the future. All right, so this is the actual shuttle body transportation system, okay, the backpack, the infamous backpack. All right, Sarah Ward likes to talk about putting on future glasses and seeing what the ultimate goal is. I always have liked to sit down with my students. We have a sort of teaching method called I do it, you do it, we do. I do it, we do it, you do it. Okay, so you may want to sit down with your student and show them how to actually put together their backpack on a daily basis. You may have to do this a couple times, but once that backpack is put together in a organized way, take a digital photo of it and post that photo at your launch pad so your student knows what their backpack is to look like. Be sure that they participate in putting it together, because that will help them develop the confidence that, yeah, that's a picture of the time when I put my backpack together successfully. I know I can do it. Another technique that I like to use with my students is to have them draw a map of their backpack and label the areas where they are keeping specific materials. So research has shown us that when students write things down, or when they draw a picture, a graphic of any content, they tend to remember better. So there's something with that eye-hand coordination that sort of chisels it into the brain. Okay, I mentioned how important it is to teach your child time management steps. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to incorporate time management into their work situation, their homework situation. So help them to plan exactly what it is they need to do and set priorities. What do they need to do now, and what can they put off until later? You can do this with sticky notes on homework pages, create piles for your sequential organizer, or lay them out on the table visually for your visual organizer. Analyze the first task that they are going to do and break it into steps. Estimate the time that your child will need to complete the steps. Have your child estimate the time. That engages them and keeps them invested in the homework process. So it's not something that other adults are like making them do. They are actually buying into it. Then have your student time how long it actually takes them to do the task and record it. And then revise for the next time as to how long that type of task will take. So here's an example for Frankie. He has to do his multiplication times table every day, 0 to 144. So his estimated time to complete that table was 10 minutes. The actual time was 20 minutes. He kind of tended to daydream a little bit. So he needs to get real about how long this task is going to take him, and so do you as a parent. And be sure to communicate that it's taking Frankie 20 minutes to do his homework, and in multiplication times tables. So maybe that's enough if he's in 3rd grade, or maybe he only needs one other task during the day. So because we oftentimes need accommodations for our kids with ADHD. So you may want to, once you find out how long it takes your child to complete the work, communicate that with the teacher. And then also next time, have Frankie plan 20 minutes. You can gradually decrease the time if that's a goal for your student, maybe to 18 minutes, and see if they can do a similar task in 18 minutes. But 10 minutes isn't realistic. And then down here we have the steps. So Frankie has analyzed the steps that he needs to go through so that he has in mind and remembers each step, so that his homework procedure for multiplication times tables will stick. Sorry, for some reason. Oh, there we go. Okay, so these are various devices that you can use for timing your student, or having your student time him or herself. Over here we have the infamous time timer, and I'm not getting anything from your sponsor for showing this. I use this all the time with my students. There is also a time timer app, and you have to kind of watch out for that, because if you happen to have a phone that turns off, you have to keep touching the screen to be sure that the time timer, the visual timer, keeps showing up. And the time timer you can set up so that there's also a signal at the end as well as a visual. This is a kind of a fun sand timer for kindergarten through grade 3 or so. For your younger age kids, you can get these sand timers in different time increments, from like half a minute to like 3 minutes. These are kind of fun because you can kind of tie it into the Wizard of Oz. There's a big time timer, or a big sand timer scene in that. Digital timers are helpful for older children, one with the caveat that they need to already have experience with the analog clock, and to really be able to use the analog clock, because they won't really get a sense of passage of time with digital timers. So that's what they need, is to understand the passage of time. In order to do that, you can use a glass-faced digital clock. This is a strategy that is actually, these little magnets are available on Cognitive Connections. And I love this idea of using an erasable marker that you can mark on a glass-faced clock the amount of time that the student projects it's going to take them to do the task. Then you place a marker in the middle, so you tell them to get started, and you'll come back and check and see how they're doing at the halfway point. All right. Remember, I said we need to be sort of the prosthesis for our children. We need to create an external structure, kind of an exoskeleton that supports their inner creativity. With real checklists are a time and true way to do this. For younger kids and visual organizers, be sure to include pictures. Also, some of the research shows that just including pictures with kids who can also read is very valuable because it attracts their attention and it's easier for them to attend to pictures. Be sure to use short lists of no more than 4 items because you don't want to overburden your student with remembering things. Remember, working memory is often an issue for our kids with ADHD. And basically, you would laminate these. Be sure to include a picture of the final completed task and post one reminder checklist in each area of activity. So you may want to post one in the bedroom by the bed for a bedroom routine. This is one for a 7th grader who may take his own meds in the morning, or a high school student who may take his own meds in the morning. So, and I know that's kind of how we set it up with my son, taking the meds first and then getting dressed and making the bed. Again, just a few items that need to be accomplished. And then you might have another one in the bathroom on what they need to do, take a shower, or if they need to brush their teeth. Not all kids take a shower in the morning, whatever your morning routine is. And then another one in the kitchen. So just a few steps for each area. And then, of course, one in the launch pad. All right, again, you know, these days with the Common Core, our kids are being asked to do critical thinking, come up with ideas, relate their ideas to text references. So our kids with ADHD do much better when they have some sort of visual or concrete representation of abstract thinking because it helps them to structure their thoughts. So I wanted to share a few apps that I found very helpful to do this. Again, so your child can be creative. This is Kidspiration. This is great for younger kids because it's picture-based. But I would say it's also good through middle school and junior high, again, because it's picture-based. Then when you get to your older student, your high school student, you may want to use tools for students. This also has some charts in it for younger students. So I like this because it's very clear and simple. These are graphic organizers that your student can use and then print out when they're done. So this is a paragraph organizer. And then for older students, we have a much more complex organizer for analyzing material in text and interpreting. So that particular app goes a whole range. You know, when all of our kids these days are doing research on the internet is kind of like the new encyclopedia. So you want to be sure that you use parental controls and that your child is not surfing all kinds of sites that you do not want them to go to. So many internet service providers have parental controls available, but there are also parental controls that you can download, such as Safe Eyes. For teenagers, there is a kind of a cool app called selfcontrolapp.com where kids can actually keep themselves off the social media while they're doing their homework. You can set a timer or specify specific times when your teenager does not want to be visiting social websites, but then later on this can be lifted. Also, rescue time is another great way to take charge of the internet so your kids are not wasting time. I just want to thank you all for having me here today, and we're going to have actual questions right now, so I hope you jotted your questions down or sent them to Susan. I'm going to take questions, and I wanted to say that if we don't get to your question, please feel free to email me at this address because I do have a website where I answer questions online. So the Diagnostic Center has several different experts that do that, and I am available to answer questions about ADHD.
That is so generous. Thank you so much.
This is my contact information, and Susan, I'm happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Shari. That was super. So many questions. Let's see. I think one of the big ones is from parents who have a hard time. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me? One of the biggest questions that people have is how to get documents to and from school.
Hello?
Hello?
I'm sorry. Are we connected?
I can hear you. I don't know if the audience can hear me. Let me ask them, audience, can you hear me? Yes, they can hear. They can hear us both. Can you hear me, Shari?
Yes.
Okay,
was there
okay,
a problem during the presentation? Did everybody hear me?
No, I think we're absolutely fine. Okay. Everybody can hear both of us, so we're all set. The question I was going to ask you on behalf of a number of participants is whether you have suggestions for making sure that the right papers get to and from school. I know that many of your suggestions, the springboard and all of that are part of it, but kids just seem to be forgetting their papers or their notebook or their lunch bag commonly in the classroom, and we know this is a big issue. So, any further suggestions?
Yeah, I would like to recommend a system called Check and Connect. So this is part of communicating with your teacher. So you need to have maybe not the teacher, but designate an adult at school who your child feels comfortable with to do a check before your child leaves school every day. So this could be like a resource specialist, it could be a paraprofessional, but this would be an accommodation or if your child has an IEP, an intervention. So they need to do a check at school, then you need to check at home to be sure they have everything they need, and you also need to have received an email or looked at a website post to see what it is they need for that day. So again, that's why I'm emphasizing communication and cooperation between you and the school, because that is essential. And it's a lot easier with all the technology that we have these days. You just need to reach an agreement with that connection at school.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about that connection? I mean, there are questions from folks about how do they get the school on board, how to get their child's teacher on board. Do you have any specific recommendations for how to talk about it at school?
Yeah, this is kind of a touchy situation. Usually we like to think that it's best to talk with the teacher at the beginning of the year. Share your concerns about your child. I know a lot of us, we don't know the teacher yet. We don't know how our child is going to react. So it's sometimes tricky. But what I like to do, and what I did with my son, was put together a notebook about him and a little bit about executive function, because I find that teachers don't really understand that kids with ADHD have problems with executive function. They think either the child is lazy or they think, no offense to any teachers that are out there, but this happens quite often, that they don't understand that the reason the child doesn't complete work is that they don't have the same level of sustained attention as other kids do. So I put together or even just a sheet when your kids are younger. May include an article about executive function. There's plenty of them in Attitude magazine. And you can just share with your teacher a little bit about what some of the weaknesses of ADHD are and what they need to be on the lookout for. And as your child gets older, I would include your child in that discussion, because when they get to college, they need to advocate for themselves, and no professor is going to come to them and say, oh, I see you have ADHD. So under ADA, they actually need to ask for and approach the professor. So it's really good if you start not too young, but in middle school anyway, having your child learn advocacy.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And it reminds me to tell everyone that ADHD Awareness Month is coming up in October, and we're going to have a lot of tools that you can use. And Shari, you point out something that we should think about. We should provide tools for kids also that they can advocate on their own behalf. So a couple of people have said that Check and Connect has worked really well for their child in elementary school, but they're really concerned about, about high school. Multiple teachers, multiple classes. Will they be willing to take the same role that teachers seem to be more willing to do?
Yeah, in that case, you may need to organize a bigger system. So it's going to be hard for you as a parent to do this. It may be difficult for you to do this by yourself, but the way to start is to start with that contact with the guidance counselor, the vice principal, or a teacher that you really know will be a good advocate for your child. Yeah, and you can still use the same system. It's just that it may not be every single teacher. So if your child has an IEP, it is good for the resource person maybe to be that person. A lot of resource teachers will keep, or the special ed teachers in high school will keep a list of what the homework assignments are and do that checking when the child comes to their organizational skills class. Otherwise, yeah, you know what? The teachers just have to get on board, and if you have a good relationship with your point person, that person can make sure that that someone in the room checks to be sure that your child has the assignment written down. And if writing down isn't working, then you may need to go to an electronic means like a website or a backup system where your student can be assigned as a partner. But someone has to be available in that class for your student to check in and check out with that day. And teachers, our kids are entitled to accommodations, and if teachers don't have to do the exact one that you're suggesting, but they do have to help make sure that your child has the opportunity to have the materials they need on hand.
Okay. Interesting number of questions about there's a couple things here. Kids who are concerned about being different. So one example that someone posted was they had checklists, but their child was really embarrassed when they had a play date and there was a checklist, in the bathroom, or a checklist. And another person similarly at school, in high school, didn't want to be labeled. What's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, you can go one of two routes. The common sense thing is, like, if you know your child's sensitive to that, you could keep those checklists in a folder and have them pick up the folder in the morning rather than posting them in the rooms themselves. And then when someone comes over, they don't necessarily have to see that checklist. You can kind of give your child a holiday from the checklist if they have an overnight or something.
Right. So, and in terms of teachers, people love the idea of a sample letter, and they wondered if you had one on your website. I will say that we do have one on our website, sample letter to my child's teacher. It's pretty general, but it's a good starting place. Have you got sample letters by chance, Sandy, on your website? Shari?
No, I don't, but that's a good question, and I'll think about posting one on my Ask the Specialist.
It's awfully helpful to have something to even start with, because it's hard to imagine, writing a letter about your child. Oh, someone posted that understood.org has a good one on self-awareness, so that's a useful tip. Anything specifically related to motivation? Number of people have said, we're all on board with this, and we try to organize, but our child doesn't feel that he or she needs the help, or is resentful, or getting cooperation is our challenge.
Right. So, excuse me, there's a couple of ways that you can approach that. As I mentioned, looking at the way your child does organize things and giving them positive recognition for that, and then talking about, well, let's just take this a step further, and having them take a realistic appraisal of how they're doing at school, um, and you know, saying, is this how you want to do? Is this the best you can do? Is this who you want to be? And asking them and listing their, you know, their information, or like what it is that they want out of school. Sitting down and setting goals at the beginning of the school year. So what is it that you want to accomplish this year? And then you can check in with them and say, well, I know you know, maybe if you turned in your homework, you know, your grade would be better. Because most of our kids would do it if they could, and a lot of the reasons that they don't want to participate in your organizational strategy is because they want you to think they're doing well. They want to impress their parents. So it's kind of like good to throw that back on them. And again, if you have older kids, you might want to think about getting a organizational tutor or a coach so that you can step out of that equation and you're not having a battle over organization. Because sometimes that can really be motivating to a child to have an older mentor or another student mentor them at school. Like, that really helped my son when he was in high school. Was his counselor, there was like a club of tutors for older kids. They were older kids who were helping younger high school students kind of get their way through high school. And he was able to get a senior when he was like a freshman and a sophomore. He was able to have a senior help him with his organization, and that was a goal for his mentorship. So that's another way to go. Sometimes having someone who's a little closer in age to your teen is really motivating. Like if you have a middle school student, having a high school student be a mentor for him in terms of organization can help with motivation.
I think that's a great idea. I want to say that people are asking how they would find an organizational tutor, and often, I'm just going to say here in New York, on various listservs that parents are on, you oftentimes see people looking for an older high school student, and so not necessarily tremendously expensive, but and sort of, as you say, Shari, someone who the child can identify with and look up to. It's a nice fit.
A lot of times community colleges, community college students are happy to help you for a minimal fee, like sometimes $10 an hour.
Right, or even less, right.
Yeah.
Here's a big concern that there are numerous posts about it, and it's one that we hear very frequently in Attitude, and it's that aren't we just facilitating our children's disorganization by being so involved? That's kind of one side of it. Are we enabling this behavior? And the second side of it is, how do we step back? When it's time to step back, how do we figure out how to do that and when to do that?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. There's a real line between enabling and actually helping your child develop those skills. So I would give them periodic breaks and just kind of see how they do on their own, first of all.
Okay.
And also, I think engaging your child in choosing organizational strategies rather than dictating to them will also be very helpful. So if you have kind of like an organizational plan, let's try this for the first quarter and see how it goes, and or try it for the second quarter, say they didn't do too well the first quarter, and see how it goes, and then if it goes well, great, then maybe next time you can take on some of this yourself. So you can take little periodic breaks. You can also just cut back on how much you're doing in incremental amounts. So maybe every day you're helping your child check his or her backpack. So the next week you only help them 4 days out of the week. And then the next week you only help them 3 days out of the week. It's a little bit to keep track of, but you gradually kind of fade what you're doing.
Okay, that's a really good suggestion, because many people are posting that this is a dilemma for them, how to let go. And what you're saying makes so much sense. Try it and see how it goes. an interesting question from a teacher who says, how do I best help a student in the moment when they're so overwhelmed by too much stuff to, sort through, too much paper? You can just see in the classroom that the kid's really overwhelmed. What should I do, she says, to help an overwhelmed student in the moment? Welcome, teachers, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the key here is to just to stop, because take a little break. Even if it's a 2-second break, take 3 deep breaths, and then verbalize maybe like what's the most important thing to get done first.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good idea. So help them come up with priorities. So a bunch of people, by the way, posted in response to that last discussion that they don't believe we're enabling our children, that we're helping them. It's not harmful, and it's sort of supporting one another and being involved in their children's organizational. Questions about college and late teens. Do you have some organizational suggestions for that age group?
Well, I included a few in this training. I think the thing is that you want to begin to get them ready to launch, because when they do go to college, they're going to need to do this often on their own. Also, you need to, when you're looking at colleges, evaluate how much support your child needs. So there are some colleges that have a very intensive level of support, and then there's some colleges that they may have like a study center where your child can, unfortunately they often call them disability center, where your child can go and get assistance. So there's different levels of support at college, so investigate the college that you're looking into for your child, and to see what level of support is available. And then again, I think self-advocacy is so important for older age teenagers, because they need to be aware of their strengths and weaknesses and how they can get what they need when they do go to college. So yeah, a lot of the same basic principles hold, except that I hope that by the time your child is a junior or a senior, they're beginning to integrate some of those strategies. And they may not be fully independent at that point, but hopefully they don't need you to sit next to them, because when they get to college, it may be difficult for them to have you sitting right next to them. But again, there are study centers, so.
True. Yeah, I think you said the key thing, at least in my experience with my daughter, was having her be used to reaching out and asking for help, so that if the services were available, and they were at her college, that she felt comfortable to seek them out. So the key thing somehow is to, I guess, and any thoughts you have on this, be welcome, make our kids feel comfortable that this is a good skill to ask for help, not something that you need to be ashamed of.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's
it is a life skill, and even kids without ADHD need to know when and how to ask for help.
Yep. I guess finally, we're using these school organization skills in daily life, whether that be doing homework, starting homework, scheduling dinner, cleanup, bedtime. Any ways to integrate these organization skills throughout the day?
Well, using a planner of some sort, and having, when your child uses the planner, whether it's an app, whether it's a assignment sheet, whatever, have the full day, or even on the wipe-off calendar, have the full day available on that time planning sheet, so that you have not only before school activities, but after school activities. So if your student goes to clubs after school, or has chorus practice or football practice, that is actually on the calendar. There are watches available, like Watchminder, and other types of watches that help your student, that will actually give your student reminders. In this day and age, I find that our phones are are actually our personal reminder devices. So you can help your older students set up times on the calendar and have reminders so that they remember what they need to do at that time. I think that's probably the best tool for older kids.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we close, can you tell me again that there's a number of people who'd like to know again where they should go to figure out what kind of organizer what kind of visual or spatial organization skills work for their child?
Well, it's on the
Or is that link too
PowerPoint.
long? It's on the PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like the third slide in, I think.
okay. All right, everyone. This is so much information here. I know you're all asking about the slides, and they will be on the Attitude website, attitudemag.com/webinars. You can download them there, and filled with great information. We'll also have a replay of this webinar if you want to listen to it again, or if you missed a part of it. It will be there. Shari, you're just a fountain of knowledge. I'm just very grateful for your time.
Well,
And
thank you very much for having me. And thank to all the participants for their wonderful questions. I
they
always
were
love
terrific.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, really great. And thanks to Time Timer, who wants me to remind you that they also have an app. So as you mentioned, Shari. And we have some wonderful webinars coming up. Chris Dendy, who's fabulous on ADHD behavior in the classroom. Secondly, Randy Coleman coming back on screen time limits, Minecraft, just a subject of huge concern to many parents. So check attitudemag.com/webinars for our announcements of our upcoming webinars. And don't forget our podcasts in iTunes as well, where you can listen to the same material. Shari, thank you again so much.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.